Hey Emma,
Yes, Madelyn.
what do you call the new diet plan I've come up with that involves riding a motorcycle, battling robot aliens, and bopping to some electronic music?
I don't know. What do you call it?
Sayonara Mass Effect. Hello, and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
See, this is what you get when I come up with a joke 90 minutes in advance,
Yeah.
as opposed to 90 seconds in advance.
A very elaborate setup is what you get.
I mean, it didn't have to be that elaborate. I could have just made it, but I wanted to reference the games.
Yeah, but see,
too.
that's what the extra time does, you know?
You're right. I add more words. I make the joke longer.
Yes.
That's been known to make jokes better, usually. Longer jokes,
Yeah,
usually.
yeah. Usually.
It did make me think of, and this is good because obviously we're throwing it back a little bit to one of our early episodes here. But do you remember the video game Gym Fun Center that was a staple on the podcast for the first year? I don't remember what the full complicated title of that was called anymore.
Another idea lost to time. It would never work now. It's too late to make a gym.
It would have to be open air. Gyms in New York are open, but I've frozen my membership.
The amount of people breathing and touching those things,
Yeah, I don't have high confidence in Blink Fitness for my $27 a month to be sanitizing especially well.
Yeah.
Although they assure me that they are via email multiple times a week.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're not talking about the state of gymnasiums here in the great city of New York City. But instead, this week we're talking about gaming classic Mass Effect and newish game. It is exactly a year old. I guess a year and a day. So it's just now outside of the new game criteria.
Saw that. Very good timing.
Just as it ages out, of Sayonara Wild Hearts. So two very different angles today, in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
So shall we dive into So I poured up my save for Mass Effect.
Yeah. So we actually had done an episode on Mass Effect Andromeda sometime back in the past.
2017, 2018-ish.
But I think it's probably inevitable that we're going to start revisiting stuff one day. And also, Andromeda and the original Mass Effects are just very different beasts from each other, I think. So instead of talking about what went wrong with Andromeda, we're going to be talking about what went right and wrong with Mass Effect.
But LOL, those faces in Andromeda, am I right? That's pretty much the entire podcast, I think, in the original one.
Yeah.
So if you want to hear our takes on it, back when, it was a new game.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that you put in Mass Effect. Well, I guess I'm not, because it was such a meme on social media. But I'm surprised that made it into the pot so much earlier than the original Mass Effect.
Well, did we start this in 2017 or 2018?
2017.
2017. So I think that, at least at the beginning, Mass Effect wouldn't have been 10 years old yet. It would have been just under
Xbox
10
in
years
2007.
old. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I guess you're right. Maybe if you were being really picky about...
I used to be very picky about it at the beginning. I've become less picky about it.
Now I'm just like, does the game sound old? Excellent.
Yeah, that's pretty much the way I do it.
Well, Mass Effect is a 2007, although then released on PS3 and Windows in 2008, action, sci-fi, RPG, third-person shooter. Isn't that a nice pithy summary?
Yeah.
From BioWare and published by EA.
Yes.
And like I said, originally for Xbox 360, and then coming to the other non-Wii consoles and computers of that generation. Mass Effect is like I don't know, would you call it a genre-defining video game? It's certainly a console-defining video game.
I mean, BioWare's games are, or were, maybe, very distinctive of themselves, right? But I think that Mass Effect definitely made the greatest impact among them. Maybe narrowly followed by, what is it, Dragon Age? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Mass Effect, if you're not familiar with the overall story, why take a tuffet down to Madelyn's lore corner, and let's give you the bare bones of this, because there's a lot that goes on across this original trilogy of games. So this first game, you are in the Milky Way galaxy that we all call home in the year 2183. What a lark that humanity still exists in 2183. What a nice, optimistic perspective BioWare is bringing to this game. When you play as Commander Shepard, and you're trying to prevent invasion by these evil alien machine life forms that are called the Reapers.
Yeah.
And it's called Mass Effect because you can transport yourself interstellarly through these mass transit things called mass relays. So you can port yourself around the galaxy, hence the title Mass Effect. I think it's weird with titles that have become so ubiquitous. The title Mass Effect is dumb.
I don't know. It sounds sci-fi-y, right? I hear that, I'm yeah, sci-fi.
The word mass is tough.
You could also say it has a double meaning because of your Mass Effect on the story.
Okay, I see that. And somebody definitely in the marketing team was we like this. It's a double entendre here. Anyway, and so now the galaxy is ruled by a council of various races, including humans, but also other races with suitably science fiction-y names.
Yeah.
And you're trying to stop the Reapers from eating everybody, because apparently they come and do that about every 50,000 years when technology gets too advanced. And when you've got teleportation devices, it's time for a feast.
Yeah.
And so you are the captain, the officer.
Captain. You're in charge.
Yeah, of the Normandy. And so you go on all these battles and stuff around the galaxy to decide the fate, I was going to say of the universe, but I guess just of the galaxy.
Yeah.
Mass Effect also in the news past couple of days. Nice little leak on the eShop. Is there a Mass Effect remaster to the first trilogy coming? Maybe. No one will confirm.
Yeah, I was thinking about that in relation to our episode 2, in that, Mass Effect is just one of those series that it feels at this point, it feels like you've missed the boat on a little bit, or at least for me. And I will be much more likely, if there is a Mass Effect remastered trilogy, to pick that up at one point than I would ever be to buy 1, 2, and 3 on their own.
Was that yet another jab at me for having the PS3 here? Or at least
no, it wasn't on purpose.
Nice little at least for me, because I gave you my PS3 out of the kindness of my heart.
No, that wasn't meant to be that. But it's just it would be so much more convenient to be able to buy them all 3 at once, especially since your save file is important to the trilogy.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the big, not gimmick, but one of the big mechanics that has made Mass Effect so influential and then at the end potentially so disappointing is that you can carry over information about the choices that you made in each game to the following games. So as something that was conceived as a trilogy from the beginning, they are able to kind of plot this story arc where the choices you make in 1 have effects in 2 and 3 respectively. And that comes down to even who Commander Shepard is in a number of ways. So at the beginning of the game, you get to make the Shep of your choice. Man or woman. Probably you get to pick hair thing. I don't know how much you get to character create.
There's a small amount of character customization. It's not just preloaded male and female form.
That's nice. So you get to make the shepherd of your choice, and that person gets to be the bisexual icon, pansexual, I guess probably cross-speciesial.
Well, I think actually if you pick a male
dreams.
shepherd, he doesn't get to be a bisexual icon until
really?
2 or 3.
It's just
I think.
The woman.
Yeah, he's not allowed to be. He's very straight in the first one, apparently. So.
Nice. Excellent. Never mind. Well, eventually, shepherd gets to embrace he, her, they's bisexual icon status,
yes.
even if it takes some genders longer to reach that point. But then, so Mass Effect really famous for making you make choices about, like, killing your friends, basically, and the eradication of species, and that kind of thing. Things that have, like, big, wide-ranging effects.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can sort of see, so how the trilogy plays out is, like, you're with this, like, one group of companions in one.
Squad mates, I think.
Squad mates. Thank you. Your squad mates who just apparently have just absolutely terrible AI from everything that I read. But your squad mates in 1. And then in 2, I don't know. I'm doing that thing of, like, that Aerith dies thing again of, like, can I spoil a game from 2009, 2010?
I think it's assumed that we can talk about broad plot beats on this.
So at the beginning of Mass Effect 2, which sort of picks up basically right at the end of Mass Effect, Shepard dies, like, suffocates in space. And then a human supremacist terrorist group, oh boy, eventually brings you back from the dead, and you work with them. They're called Cerberus. You work with them throughout the second game. Which sounds to me like, again, I haven't played Mass Effect because, like you said, it does feel sort of like, well, if you weren't playing this in the early teens, it's kind of too late at this point.
Yeah.
But it sounds to me like you're working with pretty much a different cast of characters in some ways. Not entirely, but it's not like just a total continuation of exactly where you left off.
Yeah. I think that there are definitely some cases of, like, your old squad mates based on your relationship with them in the previous game. Like, you still meet them. It's not like those characters are gone forever. So their relationship with you, depending on which one it is, some of them I think is less important than others. But where your relationship is important to how they react to you.
So basically what I'm saying is they do a pretty good job doing the port over from Mass Effect to Mass Effect 2. Partially just because, of course, this sort of thing, as we'll talk about, becomes just exponentially more difficult the more times you're porting over more choices.
Yeah.
Right? But also because they seem to have made the smart move of resetting things a little bit. And it's not just like, we're going to immediately pick up right where you left off, and everything that you just did is going to be immediately relevant to what happens in the story.
Yeah.
By building in that, like, dead 2 years, you give yourself enough breathing room for things to have changed independently of what the choices you made previously were. Mass Effect 2 makes an appearance in that hallowed halls of the Wikipedia greatest games of all time list.
Yes, I think it is generally the popular opinion that Mass Effect 2 is the best of the trilogy.
Yeah. I talked to Clickbait Boyfriend, you know, Xbox owner in the aughts and early teens. I was like, this feels like a game you've played. Did you play this? And he played the first one, and his review, which matched up with some of the reviewers I saw, is that the story felt very cool and innovative at the time, but that the combat was kind of clunky.
Yeah.
And that it didn't make him want to come back. He thought the story was good, but the combat was too clunky to come back for the second game. Because it's this weird, like, RPG third-person shooter mix.
Yeah.
Which, like, kudos to them for trying something interesting. But does sound a little bit like they didn't really know that much about how to make it. They mostly made RPGs. They didn't really know that much about how to make a shooter. And they didn't play as nicely together as they could have. Although Mass Effect still got great reviews. So 2 is like the crowning achievement, the pinnacle of the series. And then we go to 3. it sounds like 3 is a pretty good game right up until the very end.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to some videos talking about Mass Effect in a retrospective type way, and I think that people maybe overestimate, like, how, like, the ending being the thing that ruins it, right? Like, it's just a problem of this type of game in terms of you have to, like, you cannot give the player total freedom to decide things, right? Like, even, there's plenty of, like, false choices throughout Mass Effect, right? And I think a lot of players, for some reason, just saw, like, the ending as a betrayal when the games had always been like this in a certain way, you know?
And I hear that, and I'd like to continue this conversation, but I will say that, of course, the place where that's going to hit the most home is the ending,
sure, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because, then you don't have any other chance to fix things. But just to emphasize how difficult this is, even to create a game that was very unsatisfying for a vocal group of players. The first Mass Effect had 20,000 lines of spoken dialogue, which they already talked about as being a lot at the time.
Yeah.
That's 20 movies worth of spoken dialogue right there. Mass Effect 2... 25,000 lines of dialogue, although one thing I read said it took them twice as long to record. So who knows for what reason that was, but 25,000 lines. Mass Effect 3, which is now, calculating your choices from 2 previous games, has 40,000 lines of dialogue.
Yeah.
40,000.
I mean, the farther you go, the more exponential growth you have on that.
Yeah.
And considering how few players actually took any Renegade options, so I imagine that I feel like as a writer I might be a little frustrated writing 40,000 lines when probably players are only going to see a very small, just the Paragon ones.
So the really innovative thing about Mass Effect, especially for the time, was its conversation system. So it's a dialogue wheel.
Yeah.
Where you have all sorts of kind of different nuances of how to describe or how to react in conversation with characters. And depending on what those are, their morality system is like, there's the Paragon side of it, which is the, obviously you're like sticking to your principles, Paragon of virtue and justice.
It's actually a little less about good and evil and more about lawful chaotic, I think, is the more accurate way.
That's what I was trying to convey, and I think the words didn't quite come out right. The pose was really what was crucial there. And then on the other side of that, you have Renegade, where exactly, like Emma said, it's sort of this range of lawful to chaotic, as opposed to good versus evil. And these, as you develop, as you make these choices, you develop points in these areas that allow you to then take more extreme versions of those choices that have impacts as you go along. So obviously that carries over to some degree between games as well. But yeah, I mean, I do wonder about that. How many players picked what and when?
Oh, it was like 95% Paragon.
Really?
Yeah, I don't have the thing open, but they released like stats on it sometime a few years ago, and it was like overwhelming majority took the Paragon path.
That's so interesting. I would think there would be more Chaos players than that.
I mean, as much as I say it's not as much of a clear-cut good versus evil alignment as, like, the Star Wars Knights of the Jedi or whatever.
Knights of the Old Republic.
Yeah, whatever it's called. There are definitely, like, Renegade is very much, like, outlaw, sort of, like, rebel with a cause. And so I think there's a lot more murder still on the Renegade path.
I mean, I could definitely see, especially if you're going to invest in this character across 3 games, not wanting to play the Chaos character for that long.
Yeah.
I just thought that...
one video I watched, like, going over it was, like, in the Renegade path, you always have to deal with your squad mates, like, being disappointed in you. And it's just not very fun after a while, so that might also be part of it.
So, shall we talk a little bit about controversies around Mass Effect?
Sure. Before we leave the Renegade Paragon thing, though, one thing I learned that I didn't know before and I thought was kind of cool is the game also tracks, like, all your squad mates' alignments, right? Between where they are in Paragon, where they are in Renegade. So this works weirdly sometimes, because whenever there's, like, a big decision, you'll get, like, Angel Devil on your shoulder based on who's in your party and who's more towards Paragon, who's more towards Renegade. But if you have, like, 2 strong Paragon alignments in your party, then one of them just, like, weirdly wants to do the Renegade option, you know, or vice versa. But it is also interesting because in conversations with them, you can actually push them along the alignments so that they're more likely to give one piece of advice or another. And in the case of everybody's favorite, Garrus Vakarian, that actually, where he is on that alignment is actually really important in Mass Effect 2 on what he's done since you last left him. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say low effort, but what an interesting way to make the player feel that much more involved in a way that in many cases I'm sure, like, has very little impact on the story, right? You could pick and choose the characters where it makes a big impact, but what a low effort way to be like, oh yeah, like, you've been talking to this person and they're, like, freaking crazy now, and of course they want you to blow up the aliens.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Like, just, that's what an interesting way to weave that in a little bit further without having to really plot anything differently.
Yeah.
That's clever. Okay, so before we talk about the ending, I want to talk a little bit about the weird controversy over Mass Effect 1. Where Fox News really latched on to, like, the one, like, the sex scene in the game, and they're like, this is pornography! You can sodomize anything that moves in this game!
Unless you're male shepherd, then you can't.
Then you cannot.
You can only...
Well, that was the thing. It was like... They were, like, doing the story on, and they, like, interviewed somebody in the industry, and that person was like, have you played it? And she was like, well, no. And then later she watched, like, 15 minutes in the game, and she was like, yeah, I mean, it just seems like I've seen worse stuff in movies. It's like, oh, okay. Imagine, like, looking at any of the marketing for Mass Effect and being like, this is a pornography game.
I mean, at the same time, like, they are very much, like, you know, pushing the relationship thing as a marketing point, right? I feel like with Andromeda, even, the marketing was very much like, you can have sex with all these aliens, which was a little bit much, I think. I'm
Fair
not,
enough.
I maybe that just skewed by how I perceived Andromeda's marketing. Maybe that was less so in the original ones. But
fair enough. Man, it's been a long time since we've had a good old-fashioned, like, video game sex scandal.
Oh yes, my favorite topic.
I just feel like now it's like, is Fortnite destroying our children? Even that's out of date.
Yeah.
Like, TikTok has taken all the energy out of this.
Yeah.
But maybe video game controversy will flare up. Could, you know.
One day.
Congress could really use something to do. Okay. So let's talk about the ending.
Sure.
Do you want to talk about it? I can jump in, but...
I mean, I don't really know the specifics of how the game ends, and I think maybe we should avoid that anyway.
Yeah.
But pretty much in the original ending, there's just basically the Paragon ending and the Renegade ending. So...
There are 3 choices.
No. The third one
No?
was patched in after with a complaint.
No, the 4th one was patched in.
Are you sure?
Maybe I'm wrong. But that's what I was reading, that it was originally 3.
I really thought it was originally 2, and then they added a third one. But maybe I am wrong.
Okay, keep talking.
Because I remember people making memes of, like, the Paragon and Renegade ones are colored blue and red appropriately. And then they added the third one that was colored green. But maybe that's just the memes writing history for me, so I am willing to admit that I'm wrong. But anyway, basically people thought that their choices ended up coming down to very small amount of options, and that it didn't feel right with all the different versions of Shepard that they had created throughout all their playthroughs.
It is 3. Control, destroy, or join. That's my spoiler-free version.
And then a fourth one was patched in?
Where you just do nothing.
Oh. What's the point? What's the point of that?
Let it all go to... Yeah, I know. Yeah, so as Emma said, apparently it doesn't even seem like the choices that you've made up to this point lock you into any one of those endings. Even if you've been playing Extreme Paragon, or like Perfect Paragon the entire time, you can choose to go full Renegade at the end, and there's nothing to stop you.
Yeah.
And also, again, not to spoil too much, but the endings, at least some of them, or all of them to some degree, lead to a lot of destruction of the things that you've built over these 3 games. And so to kind of add salt to the wound of, well, the ending is only decided by this, like, final 3-pronged choice with no regard, basically, to what you did up to this point, it also is like, hey, remember all the things that you sacrificed so, like, this species could, like, be fine? Too bad. They've all exploded now.
Yeah, I have heard that the ending is a pretty big bloodbath for all of your characters, too.
So it's not even just disrespecting the whole... Not disrespecting, I shouldn't use that word. It's not even disregarding mostly the whole chain of choices you've made up to this point, but it's actively, like, ripping out some of those choices.
Yeah.
Which, you know, is a creative choice, right? If the choice is to be at the end, hey, remember this series that you've spent 5 years of your life investing choices into? Well, too bad. The universe is random, and bad things happen. You know, that's an artistic choice. But the fans were not pleased.
Yeah, to me, like, my gut reaction is actually, like, giving you a choice at the end there is maybe a mistake, and maybe you should just be locked into a route based on your alignment. Because, like, you can trust the player to continue, like, playing the Shepard that they've been playing, but if you give them a choice to, it's totally possible they'll pick a different one, and the character development is just totally like, well, that came out of nowhere, you know?
Yeah.
So I do wonder about but then again, maybe they thought people would be upset if there was no choice at the end, considering that it is a very choice-based trilogy. So you're sort of between a rock and a hard place there.
I guess. I mean, I feel like the middle ground is show the players all 3 of the choices, but they can't pick all of them. Right? Like, if you try to pick it, it's like, your Shepard wouldn't do this.
It just, like, the video comes up of the CEO of BioWare, like, looking at you with disappointment. It's like, come on, man. Be true to your Shepard.
I'm just saying, I mean, obviously not that, but it does feel like it's like, okay, either you can't have it both ways, like you said. It's like, either it has to be totally free choice, and of course, I'm sure you could have a headcanon of a Shepard that was acting the Paragon the entire time, only to throw everything into chaos at the last moment because of whatever. But I do like your take of this shouldn't even have appeared as a choice. I think people still would have been angry because it still seems like in the original version, pretty much a lot of choices were not only blown up, but also just, like, ignored or, like, handled poorly.
Yeah.
In terms of the kinds of things that you see at the end. But, you know, fortunately, they've totally fixed it now. Right?
I mean, it's a lot to ask for them to patch in a fix to the ending, right? Like that, at that point, you can't do anything. It's out there. You'd have to make so many fundamental changes to fix that. And in lieu of doing that, they're just like, okay, here's another one.
Well, and it seems like the patch also hopefully adds a little bit more explanation and a little more nuance to those 3 choices, so that it better reflects some of the choices that you made up to that point. But it's still, you're absolutely right. So this is one of the, I'm sure it's not really one of the first, but it feels to me like one of the first, like, big internet outrage petition moments in the gaming sphere.
It's certainly one of the first ones I paid attention to, or remember paying attention to.
Absolutely. So they started this campaign called Retake Mass Effect, which actually seems to have had, like, a charitable arm.
Well, that's good, at least.
Like, yeah, they raised $80,000 for Child's Play.
Good.
As part of this, which is like, you know what? We've really gotten more toxic, haven't we?
Yeah.
Because that doesn't happen. It's not like I tweet something angry on Twitter and then I give $5 to a charitable partner.
And maybe that should be something, like a swear jar. If you're trying to wean your friend or son or something off of making troll tweets online, every time they do it, you're like, go donate $1 to a charity.
Man, the people that spam, like, Twitch chats are gonna be broke fast. But somebody complained to the Federal Trade Commission that it was, and the Better Business Bureau, that it was, like, false advertising, the complete control over the game.
Yeah.
Obviously, eventually these people lost their cases, but that's gaming entitlement for you.
Yeah.
But, you know, in response to this fan pressure, they did release that patch.
Yeah.
Thus dooming everyone
Yeah.
to fans yelling at them to change things for the rest of time.
Yeah. I mean, I want to be clear here, like, sometimes, like, I think there can be a difference between, like, just being unhappy with something and asking the creator to change something that's actively harmful or hateful within the game, right? Like, I don't want to say, like, fans should never complain about things either. Or even that fans should never be, like, at the creator, hey, maybe this is messed up, you know? Like, it's a thing where there are lines and different reasons for doing it, but I do think that by bending there, I think maybe they did set a difficult precedent.
Especially in a medium like games where, like, there's actually sort of something the company can do.
Yeah.
Right? Like, obviously, as we just said, it's not really possible for them to change the ending to be what the fans wanted it to be without just seemingly something that was certainly not possible for an Xbox 360 to handle.
Yeah.
In 2012 or whatever the third game came out. But people, like, change the ending petitions in particular just leave a bad taste in my mouth. Like, with it's always, like, not always, but I do feel like a lot of the high-profile ones are, like, sci-fi fantasy fans.
Yeah.
It's Star Wars, it's Game of Thrones, it's whatever.
And I mean, those endings have problems, right? Like, just, I'm an outside observer from both of those, too, and I can recognize that there are problems. But at the end of the day, like, it's out there. And maybe you just have to deal with that.
I mean, it makes sense why those kinds of series inspire that kind of fervor, because they're the kinds of stories where you're with characters over a long period of time and develop strong feelings about how they should behave and how they would act.
Yeah.
And in Mass Effect, even more so, because you are literally creating the characters and, to some extent, how they would act.
Yeah.
Over the span of 3 games. Like, even more that I'm like, Jon Snow wouldn't do this.
Yeah.
Like, I could literally be like, to some extent, Shepard wouldn't do this. Unless, of course, you are deliberately playing with the expectations of the player there, which is a risky path, and not, I think, what was happening here. So, hey, maybe with the remastered edition, they'll actually change the ending. Wouldn't that be something?
That would really be something, yeah.
The remastered came out, and it was like, brand new ending.
Yeah.
And they told no one.
Yeah.
That'd be hilarious. But, you know, I mean, kudos to BioWare for making something so ambitious.
Yeah.
There are not very many games that tell such a, like an ongoing story that continues to at least pay attention to the things that you did before.
Yeah.
That I can think of, anyway. So, that's cool. Y'all probably wish you'd come up with it, like, a few years later, so there was a little more technology to support it. But even then, 40,000 words is a lot.
Well, from a big, complex game, let's go to
a
little...
game that has, like, 200 words.
Little simple game.
Little game.
Little game.
It's Sayonara Wild Hearts.
Yeah.
Which, as we said, literally is celebrating its first birthday yesterday.
Yes, so it came out just last year now. Developed by Simogo and published by Annapurna. We saw it at a few PAXs.
I guess it was at last year's too, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think
Just
so.
To, like, play. But when we saw it in 2019, it was like one of those rare demos that was almost as fun to watch as it was. Like, people would just like stand around.
Yeah, we stood and watched it for a bit.
Yeah.
Starring Queen Latifah.
That is such a wild story too. Developers like, yeah, like Annapurna asked us like, oh, who would you want to narrate it? And I was just like, not really thinking, I don't know, like Queen Latifah. And then 2 weeks later, she had done it. The benefits of working with a publisher.
Yeah.
In a nutshell.
Yeah.
Queen Latifah.
Please don't expect your publisher to always get you Queen Latifah.
Not every publisher can deliver Queen Latifah.
But it is a possible benefit.
But it's something you should ask them about.
Yeah.
Just in case.
Can you get me Queen Latifah? Just checking.
Worth putting it out there.
Can she just come say hello to me?
Video chat, even. It's basically, so Sayonara Wild Hearts, basically on all platforms, including, it was really the breakout hit of Apple Arcade when it first launched. Although I have played it on the Switch.
Me too.
I've still not caved to Apple Arcade.
There's a lot of games on there.
I know. I have a lot of games that are discs.
You should just set aside a month to play a bunch of Apple Arcade games, or however long like their one subscription period is.
You're right. I'll just set aside a month.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't go to work. It's Apple Arcade.
That's not quite what I meant. I meant from other games or whatever. Just go through the entire Apple Arcade catalog.
I can't do that either. Anyway, Sayonara Wild Hearts, they always describe it as like, it's a playable music video, or it's a pop album arcade game.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Which is it's a pretty good, pithy description, and pretty good marketing. Somebody came up with some good marketing copy.
It's not inaccurate either, so.
I know, it's like, it's accurate, but also not only in a, like, this is literally what it is way, but also in kind of a, what does it feel like way?
Yeah.
It's the synergy there, and also being something that sounds interesting. It's like, nice. Good job, whoever thought of that.
Yeah.
And so in Sayonara Wild Hearts, here, it's Madelyn's lore corner for this game that is like an hour and a half long. Uh-huh. So it was especially complicated. Like, you don't need to follow any of this to enjoy the game. Especially if you're someone who, like me, whose knowledge of tarot is pretty much exclusively Persona-based. Yeah. Maybe there's some resonance here for folks that are a little bit more into tarot than I am at this stage in my life. But you play as a lady with a really broken heart, like a colossal broken heart, and you get transported into this alternate tarot universe where you become the Joker, the Fool.
Yeah.
And then you fight monsters with your friends in a turn-based RPG. No, just kidding. And then you do fight tarot monsters.
Yeah.
But on motorcycles and with your fists and riding a majestic stag on rails, basically.
Yeah.
And eventually you forgive the tarot monsters and you restore harmony to the world and get your groove back.
Yeah. It's basically like her broken heart has, like, destabilized the universe or something, and only through going through the tarot quest or whatever can the balance be restored. That's the basic premise.
There was a fair bit of stuff in the reviews of it that was like, oh, the plot's pretty thin, like, it's pretty whatever. But then I also saw, like, a lot of people, I mean, on, like, Simago's Twitter, who were like, this game was so moving, like, it's really got me. It's the, you know, the thing with these very simple plots.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't... I think that if they added more to it, it wouldn't be a fun game anymore, to be honest.
And they won't be adding more to it.
Yeah.
They've been like, absolutely not.
Yeah. I mean, I read a Gama Sutra post from them that was talking about, like, they just tried to pare it down to the simplest it could be, both in, like, in everything about it, right? Like, apparently they used to have, like, some third person walking around solving puzzle things in between levels that they just totally cut because it just wasn't working with the flow, basically.
It's hard to imagine the game with that.
Yeah, isn't it?
Having played through the whole thing.
But one of their goals, or at least what they settled on for their goals, was that it could be a game that almost anyone could pick up and start learning how to play it, you know? So, like, they kept it to the arcade buttons, except for, like, a back to go to the menu.
It was so funny how upset they seemed about having to add a back
Yeah.
button.
They were like, oh, we had to add a back button. We had to cave. Because it really is just kind of the analog stick and, like, the A button, basically.
Yeah.
To play it.
And the music is boppin'.
Sure is.
The big selling point. It's a very stylish game, and it hits on, like, an exact subgenre of music that I really liked listening to in the car in high school.
Yeah.
I feel like. So I dug it. If you're not into, like, dreamy indie pop, I would be interested to see the reaction of someone who's not into dreamy indie pop to this game. If it was still a satisfying game, or if it was just like, this was really annoying. But it's a pretty accessible genre.
Yeah.
And a fully original soundtrack.
Yeah.
One of their inspirations, by the way, are like Taylor Swift, Carly Rae Jepsen, which I thought was funny because I was like, right at the time that this is the kind of music that I would have been listening to a lot. Like, who would I have just absolutely laughed out of the room? Carly Rae Jepsen. And Charlie XCX and Churches and some K-pop and J-pop, like all sorts of kind of electronic stuff.
Yeah.
Not like electronically infused pop. That is very good, and is also very good acoustic. Did you watch the composer?
I didn't, actually.
An acoustic set of some of them. That's what really cemented for me that it's the kind of music that I like, because like I'm like, oh, it works in like the acoustic version. Like, I would buy the acoustic album,
yeah.
Absolutely. So it was like really like, ooh, targeted.
Yeah.
But this game really masters flow, I think.
Yeah. Like, my one problem with it, and I think I just have some sensitivity problems in general, because of the games that give me discomfort, but parts of this game did cause me discomfort. Like, all the forest levels were very hard for me to get through, because they gave me a bit of a headache. With especially the first person ones where all the lines are going really fast at the trees. So I will just say that if you have photosensitive epilepsy, maybe this game isn't for you. Or are just, bothered by patterns in general, like I seem to be.
Yeah, if you don't like patterns. I'm just kidding. I haven't really talked about what the game is, I guess, so maybe I should do that.
Sure.
I mean, I do think calling it a playable album is a strong description.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like you're basically on rails, or some people have also called it like an auto runner. Although the developers say like that was not something that they were thinking about when they were playing the game. So it's like, once again, this is a game that feels like something, I mean, obviously we would not have created it nearly as well, but it feels like a game we could have created from a mashup of if we were like, okay, it's like Panzer Dragoon or like Star Fox meets like DDR or Guitar Hero.
Right.
And we would have had something dumb, like it has like an alternate controller or something as well as part of our mashup. But that's kind of what you get here. Of, as the music is playing, it's not exactly a rhythm game, but there's definitely some rhythm game elements of you're on rails and like picking up different points items and having to make jumps. Or I don't know if you found, all the reviews talked about this one and I had forgotten about it, and then I had like the flashback. Do you remember the Parallel Universes one where you're like jumping back and forth?
Yeah. That
one I died on a lot. So sometimes you're having to hit the button to like flip yourself into the twin world. That is a good indicator of how different each of these levels is, while also making use of the exact same mechanics.
Yeah. No, if you fail on one part enough, Queen Latifah will ask you if you want to skip that part. I did take her up on that on some of the forest level ones.
The, like, people going for high scores in this community is insane.
Yeah.
Just absolutely way beyond anything that I've, like, ever done with this game. But also, there's this, like, very in-depth article about Sayonara Wild Hearts on NPR, like, 3 days ago. Which I thought was interesting and bizarre. The timing of that. About somebody talking about how this game has become, like, their comfort game in quarantine. That, like, taking them to a different world. And, like, the colors that gave you spasms. Like, being this, like, kind of soothing thing. So that was interesting. It's always interesting to me how people take games that can be sort of relative blanks, and if you hit them at the exact right time in your life, they become very meaningful.
Sure, yeah.
Because that seems to be kind of the driving force behind a lot of people's emotional responses to this game, is like finding it at a time where they really identify with this super sad running lady wanting to ride their own deer.
I mean, I think that can be the case of anything, right? Like, I know a lot of my favorite things are things that I happen to watch at the right time in my life or find at the right time in my life to resonate with me, right?
I mean, of course, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's just especially interesting to me in things that otherwise get criticized for, like, a lack of story, where that lack of story is almost the thing that drives people to find the identification.
Sure,
there.
Especially since you don't like minimalist stories.
I think it works fine. I mean, I think this is a great example of a game that, one, it does really exciting things by playing with limits, right?
Yeah.
Like, you are always on the rails, you can only move and press the A button, and there's a soundtrack. What can you do with that? And it's very exciting to watch. I mean, each level finds new things for you to do, which you're, like, constantly having to adapt and keep up, which is cool to me. It changed in ways that I didn't expect. I sort of thought it was going to be I mostly thought it was going to be mostly motorcycle game,
right.
And it was not. So that's cool, but it's also a great example of a game that knows that it's done.
Yeah.
And big kudos to the studio for saying, I mean, not really, I would like some DLC, but kudos to them for saying, no, we're not doing a sequel, we're not doing DLC, we're not interested in that. Because it is a contained little story, and as much as it would be fun to do other things with that kind of boppy soundtrack.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a cool concept. I'd love to see some musician one day, like, the way Beyonce does, like, her visual albums, like, just release an album that's also a video game.
That would be sick.
Right?
When somebody does this, we're gonna be upset. Maybe this is the future of theater.
Maybe.
Instead of actors. Forget the actors. Fire the actors. We're just going to do the musical as a video game.
Man, I would play a video game that's a musical, okay? Whenever Nomura makes his musical game because he liked Les Mis so much, I will be there to buy it.
I hate that. Can somebody, in the way that they brought Epic Games on to help at the theaters in the UK, could somebody bring Square Enix on to do a production of Les Mis? A lot of belts.
Oh man, so many belts.
I was gonna sing from it, but I
yeah,
stopped
you
myself
should
just in time. Belts. That's it. That's the preview.
Good.
Did you know which song I was
Yeah,
singing?
I knew which song.
Good. That's dangerous. But I would recommend, I think it's cheap right now. It was only $15 when I bought it, like, at launch, so I can't imagine this game is more than $10 normally now.
Yeah, or you could just grab Apple Arcade for a month and play it.
I have seen some mixed reviews about touchscreen play, that if your touchscreen isn't well calibrated, that it gets frustrating fast.
That makes sense.
But if you can get it, you can get it on literally anything. So get it on Apple Arcade if you're into Apple Arcade. But otherwise, everything is on sale right now, always. So, and it's definitely been on sale. Or you could get the big fancy Annapurna pack.
I know. I'm kind of tempted, to be honest.
If it hadn't been like $1 million and I hadn't already played a bunch of the games.
Yeah.
So, in short, if it was entirely different from what it is.
I'm always very tempted by, like, fancy collector's editions. It's just, I never buy them.
One day when you have, like, a case to display them in.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've been putting it off long enough. What's the mashup?
It's a runner with music, but every once in a while you get to, like, a fork in the road. And you can either go down the path of the angels or the path of the devils. And the music changes based on that.
Interesting. Like a create your own playlist sort of thing. That's interesting. The challenge for me here is how do you integrate the supreme amount of character interaction and story and then throwing that all out of Mass Effect. I'm just kidding. But all of the, like, that, how intensely connected to the characters you are with a story that is, like, really just, like, a cipher. Right?
I mean, that's why I just ignored that. I went straight for choice-based. Straight for morality systems. You can work that in there.
I mean, that is the most obvious way to do it, but also doesn't feel like, you know, how is that different from Sayonara Wild? Like, it doesn't feel like we've created something that's that new.
Maybe, like, you have, like, a literal angel and devil on your shoulder. And the more you go towards one path, the other one, like, dies. Or something.
What? What?
That's, like, a big choice in the first Mass Effect, right? Like, who dies?
I mean, yeah, it is, but, like, what? It's like, is there
and then you've got characters, you know, that, like, are representing it.
Okay, but I need it to affect the gameplay a little bit more as well, right? Like,
well, you get different levels based on the direction that you're going, right? Like, you have, like, 3 stories, right? You always pick the angel path, you always pick the devil path, or you pick some combination of the two to get to the middle path, right?
Okay, so what's the, like, really blank story, then?
You know, it's like,
Zodiac.
No, like, your heart's been broken, and if you go all the way down the devil path, like, you want revenge, you know, and you go down that way. But if you go all the way down the angel path, you become, like, a nun or something. And then the middle path is, like, finding forgiveness and moving on with your life. How's that?
So this is a game that does not reward character consistency, is what you're telling me.
Yeah.
Punishes character consistency, in fact. Neat. And so all the way at the end of the red path is like, you're doing it to like black metal.
Sure,
right?
yeah.
And it's just full classical music on pipe organ.
Yeah.
And the good side. And then the middle, we get Carly Rae Jepsen.
Sure.
Well, I guess we get Queen Latifah.
Yeah, we get some Queen Latifah music.
Right in the middle. Squarely down the middle.
That's how the spectrum goes. You got full classical, organ, holy choirs, black death metal, and then right in between is Queen Latifah.
The most neutral of music. There's interest. I'd love to see this game play with a silent level after all the music, though, somewhere on one of the paths.
After the angel or devil dies.
Exactly. Exactly. I don't love that it's still a breakup story. That feels too similar.
I mean, you could change it to anything in terms as long as there's like a bad way to react to it and a too good way to react to it and a human way to react to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And they can't be tarot cards anymore, right?
Sure, yeah.
They either are going to be like, we could either lean into the Zodiac, although maybe that's a little appropriative.
Well, you could, like, is the Leo stuff, the astrological signs, is that appropriative? I don't actually know.
Oh, I guess not. Yeah. I was thinking Chinese Zodiac, but you're right that we could go like full on co-star on it. At the beginning, you get to pick like your character's moon rising and sun rising, and and that affects the story somehow.
Sure.
Color palette. I don't know.
Just your character's look.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, like pure Gemini.
Yeah, and then you have like
rising.
4 arms. Or if you're Leo, you're just a lion.
I hate that. I think that is what it has to be. And each level starts with like one of those like little co-star 1-sentence like horoscopes for the day.
Yeah, I like that.
Of like, has someone betrayed you lately?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if that's what those are. I feel like when people share them on social media, sometimes I'm like, that's like, why do you want this? Why do you want like an app being like kind of rude to you?
Well, it's about the certainty, you know?
But there is no certainty.
But there is if you believe what it tells you.
But I was doing more of like a Mass Effect take of like, yeah.
So it's about someone escaping their reliance on daily horoscopes.
Oh, that would not get a good fan response. It'd be a very bad fan response. Just consistent, I guess. Or what if the trick is, no matter what, it only depends on like what you picked at the beginning? The only choice that matters is your astrological sign at the beginning.
Sure. Why not?
When you get to the end, it's like, you did the good path? Like, sorry, you're a Gemini.
Geminis can't do the good path.
Yeah. Oh, that would be pretty funny.
I think there's a decent nug of a concept somewhere in there.
Yeah. Well, I hope that that Simogo calls us about it and says, we've changed our mind.
Yeah.
About a sequel. You can carry over save data from Sayonara Wild Hearts. It's the same for everyone.
Oh, man.
Well, folks. Did you ever play Mass Effect, and who did you decide to kill, and how did you feel about that Mass Effect 3 ending? Are you, like us, sort of excited that maybe the game will become more accessible to players now with a remastered version? Have you played Sayonara Wild Hearts, and are you, like, bopping to the soundtrack like I was this morning when I was reading a bit about the game in preparation? Or do you have any other thoughts about the episode? If so, you should follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast, where you can see kind of all of our thoughts about stuff, watch Emma's videos on YouTube, sometimes we share articles, all that kind of thing, but also see all the latest updates on our website, which you can also visit at www.talkthispodcast.com. While you're there, read more about the show, more about us, more about the games that are in the hat that Emma's about to pick from, and also check out our blog, featuring now semi-complete series, Clickbait Boyfriend, and Split Screen, which will never be complete, as well as a bunch of other bonus. This week has been a week of blog riches.
Yeah.
You should check out Emma's thoughts on The Last of Us 2, and how it does or does not implicate the player in the violence of the game. And also an interview with Emma conducted by yours truly, documenting her very first win in Fall Guys.
Yeah. So you're speaking with royalty now.
Queen Emma.
Yes, I have a crown. Won by my own ability, not just
by... She's wearing it now. Apparently, Mediatonic sends you a crown.
Yeah.
When you win.
Yeah, I don't know how they get your address, but they send it over. It just appears at your door one day.
Anyway, for those kinds of hysterical nuggets, check out that blog. And all sorts of more fun things coming soon. But finally, and most importantly, if you like the show, why don't you subscribe? We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, anywhere you can find podcasts, you can find Talk This. So next week, it's a side quest where Emma will be picking the topic that we'll discuss in detail for the episode. But in 2 weeks, it's another main edition. So, Emma, what are the games going to be?
Our old game is going to be Fable.
Nice.
And our new game is going to be Valorant.
All right. Fable and Valor and Ants.
Yeah.
3 great games. Well, tune in 2 weeks to hear us discuss those 2 games. Emma, any idea what next week's show is going to be about? Anything bopping around in that brain of yours? I've used bop like 20 times this edition. I'm sorry, listeners.
Not at the moment.
No bopping going on.
No bopping going on.
Well, hopefully something will bop on over for next week on Sunday at noon. But for now, listeners, thanks for tuning in. Emma, do you want to sign them off? Do you want me to sign them off?
How about you do it?
All right, listeners. This week... oh, I just remembered the opening joke. Oh, I'm so funny. I hope you saved sayonara to any